Hi, I'm Jim McCann, founder of 1-800-Flowers. We created this podcast to share the wonderful people we get to interact with, we get to meet, we get to know, and most importantly, get to learn from. So I invite you to join us on this journey here on the Celebrations Chatter podcast. So I'm here today with John Bowe. John's an interesting guy. We'll learn a little bit about him, and we'll learn about what he's expert on. And he's made himself an expert on speaking about speaking. And he's written a book that came out a few years ago that came out in 2020 called I Have Something to Say, Mastering the Art of Public Speaking in an Age of Disconnection. How do you occupy your time professionally?
Well, I have an 11-year-old son that doesn't answer professionally, but mostly what I do is I write and I work with people to help them do better speeches and presentations. I'm starting a nonprofit to work with kids, and my real goal, I want to disseminate a curriculum to teach everybody how to speak again, and I want to roll that out nationwide and then worldwide. So I will never be without jobs. I will never be idle.
Well, that's a big ambition and an important ambition. I think it has elements of things that could really help a lot of people. Tell me, John, how in this world of increased digital connectivity, how do these digital tools impact people's ability to communicate, to express themselves, to get ideas across, and to have conversational relationships?
When I first started this book, and this is back in 2010, I was even though you're supposed to be an objective journalist, I don't think anyone really is. And so my bias was against social media and technology. And I was pretty convinced this stuff is part of what's undermining our ability to speak together in real life or speak together like this. There's a lot of bad social science out there, but what I found, the stuff that seemed good and credible really did not agree with me. It really made the case that people who want to connect with other people use technology to do just that, and people who want to hide out and be isolated use technology to do just that.
So like everything else, it forces people to the extremes?
Yeah, you could say that. It encourages their tendency to go to extremes. It's kind of the lazy way out.
I find it beneficial. And what I mean by that is, and I know the inverse of that, but as an older man, I'm someone who knows that I need good social interactivity. And I find that digital tools help me, especially with adult male friendships, to maintain connectivity. I see it in my family. I have a wife and 3 children and in-laws and now 7 grandkids. And while I understand my children's reluctance to allow their kids to have their digital device, and I see the pains they go through about when do they allow them to have their own phone. But then on the other hand, as a grandfather, I'm thrilled when my granddaughter got her own phone and I could text her in the morning telling her I hope she does well on that exam she was nervous about, or I could text with my grandson who I know is anxious about a basketball game he had to see how he did, and he's texting me in the car on the way home from the game with his dad and telling me, we won by 1 and it was an exciting end of the game. So from a selfish point of view, that helps me to have more and better relationships. I mentioned in terms of it, maintaining adult male relationships, for instance, I think of all the time is we have a beach house out at the eastern end of Long Island. And there's a group of guys that I play golf with on weekends in the summertime. And years ago, when we'd get together Memorial Day weekend for the first time for the season out there, it'd be, I hadn't seen them in 8 months. And now we feel like we haven't been disconnected all that time because we have a text thread and we're sharing stories or jokes or news about someone, or someone got a new position, or someone just sold the house and bought a new one. Those are 2 instances in my life where digital communications helps me to have more and better relationships. But I could see, I read a lot about how people think about Instagram and Facebook and how it creates an idealized world. That's not particularly germane in my world.
It's almost 2 different things. One is just being able to maintain your contact with your friends. And if it's a relationship that's already established in real life, I agree. It just supplements it. I think that stuff on social media where people are always feeling less than and comparing themselves to others and some people really put a lot of effort into maintaining this bright, shiny profile. And if you're not that type of person, which I'm not, I think, it would be easy if I cared about that stuff to feel like, gee, everyone else is having so much more fun and they're surrounded by people and here I am by myself. I think that can really hurt people. But even just separately on the level I'm really focused on, which is just how do we maintain these skills? How do we enhance or teach these skills from the ground up, from zero? I do feel like that social media or any kind of technology interface can help that as long as no one mistakes that for the real deal or the primary foundational level.
One of the tools I've learned to use over the course of my adult life is humor. I do find humor is harder in a digital environment where you don't necessarily have all the other clues, the visible clues, the body language kind of cues to tell people, oh, that was a joke.
And certainly if you have any kind of attention or problem with a person, I find electronic communication is a disaster. I mean, I've worked with so many smart people who just said, yeah, the moment that there's tension, I just said, pick up the phone.
Why does picking up the phone make it better?
Let's say you and I are planning a lunch and we just are going off road, and like, well, what about this? And can we make it 12:15 and not 12:30? How about 12:22? And like, how about that place half a block closer to my house?
Oh, I see. Versus an email string.
Or just versus a phone call. If it's too many messages and I'm doing something else, I'm gonna think like, Jim, come on, let's make a plan.
Yeah.
I might be annoyed and you won't pick up on it because you're just making a plan.
Yeah. Or someone else is doing it for me.
Or someone else is doing it for you. But at a certain point, I may think, why are we having so many emails or texts or whatever about this? And if we pick up the phone, I'm going to hear the warmth in your voice. I'm going to remember, oh, that's my old friend Jim.
Yep.
99% of whom I like and agree with and I'm excited to see. And so it really transcends that kind of annoyance that can just come through the device.
Now, in your work, when you wrote this book, I'm sure you're called upon now all the time, John, for people who need help with their public speaking. And I think people assume when they see the title of your book that it's mostly about public speaking, but it's not. It's about speaking in all different kinds of ways. But I'm here in a work setting here at Flowers, and how could your work help people here in their professional lives and their personal lives to think about, to develop and work on their not just public, but their speaking skills?
I never had public speaking or speech training or any of these ideas on my radar. I mean, to the extent that I was aware of the existence of this as a thing you can do, I thought it was dumb. I thought that I was too cool, that I didn't need this. I'm a writer. I'm funny. I'm loose in my normal life. I'm not shy. And I kind of didn't notice that whenever I had to go speak in public, I was bad at it. And that it was deeply unsatisfying. Every time I had to go do something fancy after I published a book and I'd be famous for 4 minutes and go, go on book
On
tour.
the tour.
I wasn't the worst, but I wasn't good. I wasn't, my level of thinking and expressiveness in writing was very good because I worked at it for 30 years. But my ability to talk about these books that I was writing was pretty bad. And I left any kind of public occasion just angry and just pissed off at myself, and wondering what am I not doing or why can't I do this?
So as a journalist, you approach this subject and say, okay, I got to figure out why am I not good at it? What are the tools I need to get good at it? And then how do I practice that? So you had a 3-step journey, and take us through that journey, how you worked at the craft.
Well, there was even a big step before that, which was this aha moment. I was in 2009 or 10, I was working on an oral history about love. And I was interviewing all kinds of different Americans talking
That
about.
sounds like a cheap pickup trick. Come on.
If that was my goal, the results were dismal. That's all I could say.
I'm working on an oral history of love,
Yeah.
baby.
Tell me your thoughts, baby. How's this whole thing working for you? So, I talked to billionaires and homeless people and people from all over different regions of the US and different classes and races and everything. And I interviewed my step cousin in rural Iowa, who was kind of the family goofball, who's my stepmom's cousin in Dyersville, Iowa. And he had been a recluse, like a storybook, legendary recluse, who had never kissed anyone, never had any pals, never had a beer at a local joint with a pal. And very nice guy, very sweet, but just kind of this man-child who stayed in his parents' basement and worked on projects like this model train or learning Chopin sonatas, as he said it. And the age of 59. He got married, and so in my family in Minneapolis kind of clucked about this, and we just wondered what kind of a person would cousin Bill marry, and how in the world did that happen? So when I got a little bit older and I was a journalist, I had license to approach the guy and say, how did this happen? How did you first talk to her? And when I asked the question, I imagined 100% that he talked to a therapist, that he got meds, that he did something to adjust his psychology or psychiatry state of mind. And instead he said, I joined the Toastmasters Club.
No kidding.
People told me it was a very nice place to meet people. And so he wasn't even a great Toastmasters. He went and did maybe 6 speeches, but it altered his approach to human relations, to communication. And the short version of the story is, instead of thinking so much about what people thought of him, he started to think of the other person and how they need to hear words to understand what he was saying. And that simple but profound shift in perspective really launched him into a new existence and a new life.
Okay, the curiosity must have overwhelmed you. What sparked him to join Toastmasters?
He would sometimes go to his local church in Dyersville. And I think people there, you know what it was? His parents were dying, and then the family dog died, and he was just alone. I think he went there to pick up chicks, but I also think he just went there to be around other humans.
So many great lessons in that. And, one of the things that I'm curious about and interested in, and I seek out good, thoughtful counsel on it, is the whole loneliness situation and what we know is an epidemic in this country. And one of the things we talk about and hear about all the time is the benefit of getting involved, getting yourself to be interested in something besides yourself, not being just focused on how you're feeling, how uncomfortable you are, but to get involved in other activities. Toastmasters, which is a wonderful organization, global organization that focuses on developing public speaking skills. It's a huge organization. You'll know the data on it, I'm sure. But it's not what I've expected to recommend to someone to go do who's a recluse and not interested in speaking in public or speaking to anybody. But what a wonderful idea.
It was such a big aha moment for me because it took everything that I was worried about, which in society, in American society, this increasing polarization and loneliness and rising rate of suicide. You could go down the list, and I'm sure you already know this stuff. The Surgeon General just came out with a report last year about our epidemic of loneliness.
He's an impressive guy, General Murty. He's done really thoughtful and important work around social issues and particularly around the loneliness epidemic. My hat's off to him.
Absolutely. This report really nailed a lot of things. It talked about teen mental illness before the pandemic was really, really bad. And then after the pandemic, it was doubled. And so they don't have enough psychiatrists in the world to be able to help these kids, or the money.
Indeed, they don't. Yeah.
So all of this stuff that I discovered was just, it sounds really simplistic, but just from the moment my cousin said, oh, I joined Toastmasters, it changed the way I think about communication. It changed my orientation to think about the people I'm talking to. That kicked in motion this 12-year process where I sort of avoided writing a book about it for a couple of years, even as I kept researching Toastmasters and what it does and the roots and how they got the idea of speech training, which they got from the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans. And then I started writing a book about it, and it took me 10 years to write the book.
Glad you did.
Yeah. I don't even swear by my book and say it's the best book in the world, but the stuff that it made me explore and think about and codify, now I teach it, and I'm a great teacher. And none of the stuff that I teach is really in the book, but it took the book to teach me how to teach it.
What an interesting journey. So that's why people are drawn to journalism, because you get to delve into things that you might not have otherwise, and you have an excuse to do it because it's your job. And if it's something you have a personal curiosity about, it's exciting. It's discovery. It takes you down all different kinds of paths. And here it is, you with the idea of public speaking and with Toastmasters in particular. What a great journey. And now it's really developed a whole new career for you beyond your journalism.
I mean, I'll tell you something that sounds a little crazy, but when I was 8 years old, and I don't know where this came from, I don't know how.
We're talking 10 years ago. Go ahead.
Dr. 10 years ago, you can see I've matured since then. I had this really grandiose but nice idea. I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to use words to make the world better. And I really love this idea of waving a magic wand and somehow through the power of arranging words in a good or persuasive way, I would make the world better. So I did a lot of social justice journalism and I did some good stuff there, but only in discovering this, which really isn't writing so much. I now can make people happy and I can support causes that I like. I can make, like, when people learn how to articulate their thoughts well after a lifetime of not being able to do it, they're happier.
Oh, sure. First of all, they're nervous, and then they do it, and then they get a good response. It's rewarding. There's an endorphin release there. There's a little bit of a chemical high.
And it creates this really positive feedback loop. So someone who thinks, I can't do this, I hate doing this, public speaking sucks, I'm just not one of those shiny people who can do that. And then they learn, oh, I can do that. I just have to, there's some skills. It's like cooking. But it's not because they're psychologically prohibited from doing it because of their character. It's just like cooking. And when they realize, oh, it's a technical skill, it doesn't have as much to do with my character or my emotions as I thought. It is the most liberating thing in the world.
So walk us through a case study where someone came to you and said, hey, I have to do this. It's a pain in the ass. My daughter's getting married. I have to give this father of the bride speech. I can't do this. You got to help me.
I'll give you a couple examples, not quite that, but I mean, I worked just in the last couple of weeks with a lawyer, a guy I got to know 20 years ago when I lived somewhere else. And he got in touch through Facebook actually.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, I'm a trial attorney. He lives in Idaho and he's got to go into court most days of the week. He does okay, but he is terrified every time he's got to speak. And I was just like rubbing my hands together because there are a couple types of occupations that I haven't gotten to work with. And I really wanted to work with attorneys because most attorneys are great at speaking. I don't know what they teach them in law school, but the ones who do trials and do litigation, they tend to be really good speakers. By the second session, he said, oh my gosh, I started putting this stuff to work and I already feel different. I already feel better. I already know that I can do
Second
this.
session.
Second session.
Wow.
So I feel like
you want to ring the bell.
And I'll be honest, writing is terrible. Writing is really hard work and it's lonely and you're just going over the same stuff again and again. You're not being smart. You're working out all of these little micro mechanics of a sentence or a paragraph or whatever. It's not super sustaining or satisfying all the time. So to have someone come to you and say, you made me happier and you did it in a short time is just the best. And I get that a couple times a week. So what do I teach the person? It's not that different than what my cousin, the recluse said. I get people to think of other people first. I mean, what I teach is the same thing every time. It's just the art of applying it varies a little bit. But
all right, come on, let us in on the secret here, John.
Okay. I'm dissembling. Okay, step one is think about your audience.
Yep.
And this comes from some Aristotle thing where he wrote The Art of Rhetoric, which is basically the art of public speaking, the art of persuasion. And he said, whenever we speak to people, we're ultimately trying to do something. We might not be lying or doing something nefarious, but we want to be believed, we want to be listened to. So we enlist three things when we do that. One is our facts. One is our emotions or the emotional state we create while we're talking to people. I make you laugh, I make you cry. And then the third is our ethos, our character. And so the credibility with which I tell you stuff is really going to carry the day.
Yeah.
And how do you do that? Well, the first thing is to stop thinking about it in that way. You start thinking about your audience. Start thinking about, who am I talking to? What do they care about? Are they from Fujian, China? Should I speak to them in Chinese? Should I speak to them about examples from Fujian? Am I talking to a group of Republicans in Iowa? Like, every group you talk to is going to need to hear stuff in a different way, even if you're trying to make the same point.
And the makeup of the audience. Bigger audiences are better. Mixed audiences by way of gender and demographics are better. Not better, easier.
Easier, but if I'm talking to a bunch of realtors from Scottsdale, Arizona, they're going to know a set of facts and a worldview, and I can target that and speak in terms that don't need definition. If I'm speaking to a larger group, I need to maybe speak a little bit more broadly.
The worst audience I ever spoke to was a group of New York realtors.
Why was it bad?
Because they were there to talk to one another.
Oh.
It was the toughest audience I've ever had.
That's a toughie.
1,200 realtors in a room that was wider than it was deep.
Oh, no. How long were you talking for?
Too long. A minute would have been too long. I had to do a half hour I did 21 minutes and said, I'm done here.
Hi, I'm Jim McCann.
And I'm George Everly Jr.
During the COVID-19 epidemic, I stumbled upon an article that Dr. George wrote, which had a real strong impact on me in terms of how COVID was and was likely to impact our social connections, our relationships. And it really, really resonated with me. So I reached out to George, basically wrote him a fan letter, and that began our relationship.
We found a mutual interest in helping people become their best selves, especially in times of adversity.
Together, we embarked on a quest to co-write Lodestar. That journey began with countless hours of researching the most impactful self-help books out there.
Once we had our picks, we combined the science with the practical.
The result of our journey, the creation of a one-stop shop for the best of the best in self-help.
We decided to write this book to help others go from where they are to where they want to be and be the best possible selves they could be.
So if you're looking to boost your career, build stronger relationships, or simply become the best version of yourself, Lodestar is here to guide you on your path.
I mean, most people make the mistake of talking too much and trying to cram in too much factual information. And what I always try to coach people, okay, if you know your audience, a lot of people just think about, oh no, what would they think of me? Oh my gosh, everyone's going to know that I'm an idiot. And then once they get over that a little bit, they start thinking about their material. And oh my gosh, I have 85 facts and 85 charts I got to show. If it's financial stuff, they just want to throw numbers at the audience. And what I really tell people is, if you think about your audience and figure out, well, why are they there? And start by speaking to that. Say hello at the beginning of your presentation. As dumb as that is, people don't do that.
No kidding.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you all for coming. I noticed that it's rainy today. If you're talking to people in San Francisco, did they have a weird weather event? Did they have an election? Like, talk about them and their world and for a minute and just acknowledge, hey, we're humans, we're alive, I'm here, I acknowledge you, instead of just jumping into, okay, I have this investment opportunity, here's what's the deal. People are just in such a rush to do that. And it's funny because I always tell people the greatest sin in public speaking is the desire to seem smart, or to put it differently, most mistakes in public speaking come from this knee-jerk urge to prove that we're smart. And the way that we prove that we're smart is to speak in a way that's weird and disconnected. And if I'm just telling you a bunch of facts instead of saying, hi, Jim, you immediately think I'm weird. And we're off to a weird start, a slightly disconnected start.
And do you encourage your students, the people you're coaching, to think about it in blocks? You got an open, you got 3 parts to the body content, and then you have a close. How do you get them to construct their material? Because most people always come, I got 2 hours worth of material for my 10-minute speech.
I just say back up. We got to start with this really foundational stuff. Who's your audience? Think it through from a bunch of ways. Are you speaking to them at a conference and it's day 4 at the end, in which case they just want to go home? Are they hungry? Like, figure all that stuff out. Think about what they want. Think about how you can serve them. Don't think about how smart you are in the totality. You have this encyclopedia in your head. They care about page 287. They don't care about the other pages. So don't bombard them. Okay, that's step 1. Just make a list of everything you can think about them. Number 2 is, what's your purpose? What do you want them to know or do as a result of your talk? And that comes right from Toastmasters. But it's just thinking, what's the purpose of this? I'm not here to ramble. I'm not here to talk.
So your friend in Idaho, his purpose in front of that courtroom is blank.
I mean, you could say it's as simple as, I want to prove my client's innocence, but it might be something else. I want you to trust me.
Yes.
Or I want you to hear this story, which is not that different. I mean, I'll back up again. I keep saying I'll back up. But, in the past, I always used to try to prove to everyone how smart and original and interesting and creative I was. And I didn't know that I was doing that, but that was always my agenda. So a lot of people have a similar agenda. I want you to know that I'm smart. I want you to know that I'm honest. I want you to know this or that. And usually if you do have one of those, it's not helping you. So in a court, I don't know yet. I shouldn't answer that because I just don't know what he needs to. It may be as simple as, I just want you to understand the facts of my client's story.
Yep. I want you to hear.
So
you have know your audience, what the setting is, time, circumstances. Know what your purpose is. If you're going to be up there in front of a group, understand what it is you want to achieve. What's next?
And so now we can go to what you were talking about the organization. And I usually tell people, block 1 is your intro. Say hello, tell people what you're going to talk about, tell people what's in it for them or what you hope is in it for them.
Tell them tell them what you're going to tell them.
Yes. Yeah, that's really true. And as a writer, I struggle with that. I hated that because I used to write for cool places like the New Yorker where they edit out any kind of repetition, anything extra. They're very elite, they're very sophisticated, and you can do a lot of these things in a more sophisticated way that doesn't have repetition. But in general, yeah, tell them what you're going to tell them what you told them, tell them again is a better way to do it. So what I always tell people is when you're learning to write and read, you're learning all of these ways of seeing information. So you know what a noun or a verb is. You know what the difference between a phrase and a sentence. You know the difference between a paragraph. When you're looking at a book, you see the table of contents. You see the division breaks within one section or chapter. You see all of these things that guide you in the reading. And so you know what the author's intentions are. You know what the pacing is going to be. You know where you are in that process. So think about speaking. You don't know any of those things. None of us do. We didn't learn it in school. And the Greeks taught people all of these different labels, and there was a nomenclature for speech. And so people knew how to organize their speech in a more coherent way for people to listen to. So if I'm working with a client, I'll say, tell them what you're going to talk about and how you're going to talk about it. So to give a crude example, I'm going to talk about public speaking. I'm going to talk about it in 3 ways. The first is blah, 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 blah. The second is blah, 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 blah. The third is blah, 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 blah. But I'm going to try to recruit you as my audience in each one of those parts. So part 1 will be what you need to learn about the history of public speaking. Part 2 is how you can learn how to do it right here and right now. Part 3 is how you will use this in your future life, doing whatever you're going to do. So then when I'm going through my speech, my spiel, I'm going to tell you, okay, Jim, I just finished part 1 where I blah, blah, blah. And number 2, I'm going to start speaking this section where I'm going to blah, blah, blah. And I'll repeat that again. And then the same, with the conclusion. And I also tell people, have an intro and have a conclusion. Tell them at the end, okay, now I hope I have told you these 3 things that I told you I would tell you about public speaking. And I thought, because it sounds a little robotic, but people don't listen as well as they write. People, they got their phones, they got the person sitting next to them, they're worried about their wife or their husband or their kid who's on drugs or their taxes. Like people are
lots of distractions.
Lots of distractions. So you need to make it easy for them. And even if they're only listening to 10% of what you're saying, if you say, Jim, I'm going to talk to you in 3 parts, each part will be about 8 minutes. At the end of the time, we'll have 5 minutes left for questions. You're probably not listening to most of what I say.
You're helping them program their brain, how to listen, what to listen for, and to have a premonition of what it is they're going to hear, learn, and how it's going to impact them. You're helping to format.
And at the end, if I sort of live up to my promise, even if 90% of you was thinking about all your stuff in life, I'm going to conclude, and you're going to be like, oh, wow, John is a great guy. He kind of did what he said he was going to do.
Yeah.
Just on this basic kind of animal level, there's a credibility that gets established that, people can go look up your website or ask you, hey, will you send me a text of that talk? I didn't hear it.
Now, how do you work with your people that you're coaching in terms of questions in a session? Everyone says, hey, thanks. Would you come and speak to my audience and then leave 10 minutes for Q&A? And I always say, well, do you really want Q&A? Oh, yeah, we want Q&A. Why? Well, I guess because a lot of people seem to do Q&A. I said, well, what is it we want to achieve? And sometimes Q&A is helpful. And as you pointed out in your book, fireside chats are a lot easier to do and sometimes a lot more listenable because not everybody can stand up and give you 45 minutes of compelling, engaging, thoughtful, interesting, and learning material. But sometimes you can pull it out of somebody in a Q&A kind of environment, and it is a lot more listenable and a lot easier for the speaker. I've seen people do very good jobs of having their cards of questions to make their points after, this is what I'm going to tell you, telling you, this is what I told you. And now I have some questions that I've gathered from the audience here that'll, and now you can tell your stories and you can make your points and you can shine a light of emphasis on the things they've just heard. So how do you coach your students in terms of how to use questions and formats.
I mean, one thing I try to get people to make their talk as interactive as possible, because most people don't have the bandwidth to listen, as you said, to a 45-minute talk. So, if you can open it up early and get people to start participating, they're going to be much more engaged and see much more clearly where they fit into your talk. So that's one thing. For another thing, it really depends on who I'm talking to and working with. Some people, the Q&As are going to be critical, or, ask them about things that they might not be able to prepare for everything.
But you can also have a great presentation buzzkilled by bad Q&A session, because then you don't end properly.
You don't end properly. That's true. I mean, okay, so that almost gets into media training. Number one, don't have a super long answer. Number two, if you don't know the answer, fall on your sword with dignity and say, you know what, I don't know that. I'm going to have to get back to you on that. Don't ever dissemble or just
Fake
make
it.
stuff up. Yeah, because it's okay. People don't expect you to know everything.
Does that take more skill, more training to get people to do an interactive presentation? The best educator, one of the best educators I know, and there's several, but a friend of mine is a fellow by the name of Jeff Sonnenfeld. He's the associate dean at the Yale School of Management, and he teaches in the Socrates kind of method. And God help you if you're not paying attention in his class, because his radar will seek you out and he'll call on you and catch you on your phone every time. But so I get to do his class once a year in the spring to the graduating master's class there in the Yale School of Management. And I'm just knocked out by him. And I say, why didn't I meet more professors like him? And I had a couple who just rocked your world and changed how you think and interacted. So Sonnenfeld, top of the list for me, because he makes the class engaging. He calls on people. He's around the room. He's looking. His eyes are looking for someone who drifted off. So everyone wants to be in his class. It's the hottest class on campus every year. And then I think of a professor I had in college, which would be 111 years ago. Her name was Professor Blanche Cook. She's still teaching, emeritus now, at the esteemed John Jay College of Criminal Justice, also on the west side of Manhattan, but about 60 blocks north of you. And her name, Blanche Cook, professor of history, government, and constitution. And I loved her class because when I went to the school, it was mostly policemen and firemen. And but she would get that class rocking in debate. I mean, people were up on their feet. They were yelling. They were engaged. Nobody missed that class. So 2 lessons on great teachers who got people engaged.
I think the art of coming up with exercises and interactive moments to get people thinking and participating from the beginning is one of the ways you can make a speech or any kind of public speaking great and make it come alive. The moment people can see how this stuff benefits them and how this is in their life and how they're messing it up every day and what kind of benefit they'll get from doing it right, that's when you really make things come alive.
All right. When do you get the nerve to call on people in your presentation?
That depends. Sometimes early. Because I'm not in a classroom at a college and I have the same kind of setup, same kind of format every day, I've always got to be improvising and thinking of things. And also sometimes I get in these really stuffy, fancy audiences and
Yes.
I can't be as loose and play around, with them in the same way that I might with a smaller, looser audience. With kids, when I work with kids, it's a blast because then I can mess around. I mean, the first time I worked with a group of kids here in New York, a sort of like a magnet program, I said in the first class, people who know how to explain themselves and their ideas to other people have a better life. You will be more successful. You'll be emotionally happier. You'll have better emotional relationships and you'll have better work relationships. It doesn't solve every problem, but it means you will feel known and you'll feel like people got you. And if you don't know how to explain this stuff, then you'll always feel out of it. You'll always feel lonely. You'll always feel alienated. You'll always feel a bit pissed off. You'll be resentful of other people, and it just correlates. There's a ton of research that correlates with all this stuff.
And I'll tell you another example where it pays off, John. I have a friend, his name is Jack Franchetti. Jack is one of the great media trainers, speaking coaches of all time. His primary customer base is public companies, and they'll hire him to train their executives to do quarterly calls and annual meetings and the like, and which is tough training because they don't want to be there. They think they're good at it, and they all come out of it going, "Oh my God, I thought I was good at this, but I really wasn't." And thank God I took this training with Jack. But Jack, I see him, he always counsels people to restate the question. Gives them time to think about it. They can emphasize the parts that they want to emphasize, and gives them a chance to organize their thoughts in a response, and helps the other listeners to understand and hear the question, which may not have been at the same audibility level. And do you train your people in those kinds of situations where they're doing financial reporting, quarterly results kind of things?
I have something very, very similar. I have an exercise where I'll tell people a couple of them. One is, tell me what you do for a living. We're upstate, we're at a barbecue, and I am not in finance. Tell me what you do for a living. And we will work on that again and again and again. And I'll just cut them off and say, I'm bored. I'm bored. I'm bored. Talk to me like a human. Talk to me like I don't know any of this stuff. What do you do? What do you do? So that's one. Another really great one is, tell me for 1 to 2 minutes about something or someone you love or hate. I'll say it 5 times. I don't want you to give me the qualities of that person or thing so much as why you love or hate them, which is a slightly different thing. So I want them to kind of build up the logic around the illogic of their feelings. You might have crazy reasons for liking or hating this thing, but tell me what they are and make them each distinct. So that kind of, your question was, what kind of extemporaneous things can I throw into a classroom or a workshop to keep it live? And that one comes back again and again and again, because I just hit people up and say, wait, what was your second reason for hating chocolate?
Well, you remind me, I had a real treat a couple of months ago. Well, actually, it was only last month, but it's almost 2 months ago, early December. I had a chance to have on our show David Brooks, who has his book out about how to really know someone. And his message is so consistent with yours, John, which is 3/4 of speaking is listening. And so you tell your students, understand your audience. A lot of that is to listen, to understand, to learn, to think. And like you said, what was your second reason for hating chocolate? David does a lot of that same kind of training about getting people to ask questions. So when that person is boring the hell out of you at that barbecue in upstate New York, interrupt them with a question, go deeper, get them off their routine so you really get to know them.
It's amazing to me how many people are bad at that. And a lot of it is just insecurity. They don't know that they can ask questions. So they haven't been in the habit of doing it, and they don't know how to ask great ones. I love what David Brooks is going after, what he's talking about, what he's writing about. I do feel like it's a twin to what I'm doing.
Very much.
And what I'm responding to, what I'm concerned about.
And where you were going, I know you're a fan of the Maya Angelou quote. I think that's the greatest lesson for us each to learn and to be taught. And it's, go ahead, tell us what Maya would tell us.
People don't remember what you told them, but they remember how you made them feel.
And when you're interacting at that barbecue, if you're interested, if you laugh, if you smile, if you interact, if you interrupt them and ask them questions, oh, tell me more about that dog you had as a kid. What was that again? What was the dog's name? If you're really interested, you can't fake it. If you're really interested and you delve, so many people who you didn't think would be interesting to get to know are like your 59-year-old recluse uncle. At the end of the day, could be very interesting.
Again, that thing I said before about people's fear of coming across as dumb or having other people think they're not smart is always such a big block. Because a lot of the reasons people don't ask questions is because they're afraid that they'll betray their ignorance. But what I have found over a lifetime,
embrace your ignorance.
Embrace your ignorance. And other people are very pleased when you say, look, I don't understand anything that you're talking about. Why are you in finance? Why did you choose this? What do you do again? Break it down. And people are really pleased to clarify. It's the opposite of what you think. I had a job once where I had to write a movie script about the fashion world. And this guy paid me to go to Paris during Fashion Week. And I'm like the straight guy.
Oh, the burden on it, huh? How did you live under those circumstances, John?
One fancy meal and one beautiful woman after another. It was terrible, terrible, terrible. But, I would show up as this schlubby Midwestern straight guy asking all of these people, like, why are you into this? What do you like about this? What made you get into this? And everyone's answers were brilliant. So here's this silly kind of fluffy world where you'd think there's no logic and there's no
but you surrendered. You didn't pretend to be something. I really know all about this. Your gift there, your secret weapon there was, I really don't know, but I want to.
And just me not pretending like I knew anything, and just
Yeah.
putting my ignorance up front. And really, I did not run into a single person who wasn't really generous and helpful.
And how has your closet changed since
Oh,
then?
It's all Gucci now. It's all Gucci. All Gucci all the time.
Well, John, I highly recommend your book to anyone who wants to develop their skills, or most especially to those who don't realize they need to further refine and develop the skills. It's not something we're born with. Some people are born with innate curiosity. You can develop it, and you can develop your skills. And I think the message, your opening message here, is the key. This kind of training, this kind of attention to skill development will make your life better. It'll make it more interesting. It'll make you more interesting to be around. It'll make your life richer and fuller. And there is no better motivation.
Agree 100%. You said it better than I could. It's just the thing I say again and again. This whole thing of connection, of interacting, is composed of these technical skills that you can learn. And it's not that different than cooking. You never heard of anyone talking about cooking anxiety. Because everyone knows you can look up recipes on the internet or whatever, and it's a quarter cup
and
of this.
Here there's recipes. And you can find those recipes in a book that was published in 2020 and is available everywhere today, saying the book titled, I Have Something to Say, Mastering the Art of Public Speaking in an Age of Disconnection, by John Bowe. Thank you, John, for sharing your wisdom and getting us to learn a lot about you today. And it only makes us want to learn more. Thanks for sharing your life's work with us, at least over the last 15 years or so, because it's been beneficial to your clients, beneficial to our community today. And I bet there's a lot more people who want to get in touch with John Bowe after hearing you today.
Well, bring it on. And thank you a whole lot, Jim.
How did they connect with you?
I have a website, which is just www.johnfbowe.com.
BOWE.
BOWE, and there's LinkedIn. You can find me through either of those. And
all right, get ready for the barrage, because you're in a position to help a lot of people. And thanks for sharing it with us today, John.
Thank you, Jim. Have a great week.
We put our heart into everything we do. We are farmers, bakers, florists, and makers who grow and create with a passion. Made with love at every step of the way. Because at the end of the day, we know you're sending more than a gift. 1-800-Flowers, share with love.
Well, I hope you enjoyed what you heard, and I know I'll be sharing it forward. I hope you get to as well. Let's keep the conversation going. Follow me along on Twitter at Jim1800Flowers and on LinkedIn at Jim McCann. Hope to talk to you soon.